Hello and welcome. The first session, first track of Philosophy, Poetics for Peace. We are searching for betterment toward a better well-being. Someone wrote a book recently and someone talked about ambiguity and practicality is missing in philosophy. And that may be true. I agree with that. Of the established philosophy that we know of, that is a problem. So this podcast will be a podcast of philosophy and wisdom and understanding in a very plain language so that everyone can understand it who perhaps has a 10th grade education, at least vocabulary-wise. It's going to be casual and in my own voice and informal. And it will deal with application so that one can put in effect what they learn and what they understand, are expected to. Now, I think the first thing to do is to realize that is what philosophy should be. And we have to go to the root of the word philosophy to understand what we mean by philosophy. The word has been used in many different ways, and it's become very ambiguous in its own right. For example, there is philosophy of business, philosophy of education, philosophy of medicine, and academic philosophy. Now let's look at the word in the root. Philosophy is a Greek word, comes from the Greek, philo meaning love, and Sophie, which just means wisdom. Many people think it's the love of wisdom, and they're right. Many other people think it's love of knowledge, but it isn't. The correct source of the word is love of wisdom. So we will use that definition in its basic form. So all these others, doctor of philosophy, all this other stuff that you hear has to be defined, because I don't know what they are. They make up their own language, unfortunately. But if we're going to use the word philosophy, we use it as the root form, the love of wisdom. Now, we might, because it's so abused and so many meanings for philosophy, so many uses of the word, I think we'll soon get away from that word and use synonyms of that word in our discussions so that there's no misunderstanding of what we're talking about. Now, love of wisdom let us talk about wisdom. I think we understand what love is, most of us. But wisdom, I think might be a discrepancy. Wisdom is the proper use of knowledge. And it is the understanding of knowledge so that you can make the proper use of it for betterment, for improvement. Now, I often go back to the Greeks. The father of philosophy, given a name, was Socrates, and his pupil was Plato, and Plato's pupil was Aristotle. And those three Greeks in the ancient world around between 350 BC and whatever 200 BC was very prominent. Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates had huge influence on Western philosophy as well as Western thought. So their definitions we'll go back to those definitions, the root of what they meant by certain words, so that we have some basis of thought about where it came from, the words, what they meant at that time. And we're talking about words like happiness. We're talking about words like wisdom and virtue. And we'll redefine those words as we go along, but we have to start somewhere. And philosophers often meant something other than what we know of today as words, certain words. And we'll talk about what the source of those words meant back then in philosophy and how it grew to mean something else, perhaps. Or we'll redefine it so people will understand it. But you have to understand that we have to go back to the root of things in order to understand them. We have to know what things are made of. It's a slow process. It may sound boring at first, but we're talking philosophy, we're talking about wisdom, the love of wisdom and understanding. And we're talking about major concepts, for instance, truth. Now, we want a set of principles to be formed that we can guide our actions and our applications, so that not only is philosophy practical and wisdom practical and understanding practical, but you will have a whole foundation of principles guided by wisdom and understanding that will drive you through your applications of everyday occurrences. Now, we will use tools in that process, and one of the major tools we'll use is reason and logic. Logic is the reason technique and the system of using reason with words generally. Now, everything I say can be disputed. We can have large discussions on every sentence I say. But I am just doing an introduction here to get to a point of learning. So I understand that there might be questions, and I will answer questions in order to make the learning experience balanced. But for now, I will finish my talk, and then we will answer questions after that. So, philosophy, the love of wisdom, and wisdom, I mean that which we can understand and utilize and apply is what we mean by wisdom. So it is not only understanding, but the application of what we understand to be true. That once we understand something, we certainly want to use that understanding to improve our condition. And this is one of the first principles of Greek philosophy, that in every action and every act and every inquiry, we tend towards some good. And therefore, the ultimate goodness, the ultimate aim of man is goodness, ultimate goodness. Now that was Aristotle's definition of why, or his interpretation of what we aim for. So we aim for the good of ourselves and hopefully the good of others. And this was a guiding principle early on in Greek philosophy, pre-Socratic philosophy, and also in many religious tribes and religious organizations or groups or societies much earlier than the Greek philosophers. So this is not new. I'm not making things up as I go along. This has been established for centuries. And I want to clarify what we're talking about. Now, since we understand what wisdom is, we can take wisdom from everything we see. We don't have to read books and books and books to gain wisdom. We know that many indigent people with lack of formal education took images from the nature as well as thought, experience, and study, as observation, and took that and made realizations out of that. We made understanding out of that. They could tell if the animals came on a certain path each time every year. They could make some deductions and assumptions from that. And that is part of understanding. If they took these images and made it so they could get food on a systematic method or methodology. So that's a form of taking knowledge and bringing it into understanding, and also an application of that understanding. Now we do that every day when we process our thoughts. And one form of understanding is common sense. When we make choices and do certain things It just makes sense to do it. Now, if you look at the word sense, it makes sense, meaning it means a certain easy understanding. There's a common understanding. We don't have to debate it. We don't have to contemplate it. We don't have to meditate on it. It's so obvious that it's common. Now, what makes wisdom and philosophy, if there is some hidden meaning in the word philosophy outside of love of wisdom, it may be in the fact that understanding which you gather from wisdom is a deeper one than common sense. One there where you could focus in on something a little bit more seriously and try to gain a deeper truth of a situation or a complex problem. And it's this deeper thought, deeper understanding, which will give you wisdom and understanding and less common sense than more deep thoughts and deep guiding principles, which would guide you during your day. So we form like habits and principles and things that we accept to be true because we've thought about it, focused on it, studied it, observed it. And these deeper understandings we wouldn't call them common sense. They're not common. They're deeper understandings. Often are things that take a lot of thought process and a lot of logic and a lot of reasoning. So we put it to a test in order to see if these things are correct or not. And we also experiment on some of these truths that we find out. Now, you may hear some people say, I've heard that before, I've seen that, oh, I'm not going to do that because I've been there. Which means that they have a deeper truth through experience. And they're not going to put themselves in harm's way or cause pain for themselves or to others. So they have found a certain truth through experience. And like I say, there are several ways to come to an understanding. Study, observation, experiment. These are some of the ways we come to awareness and of things that are. Now we're going to talk about morality and a set of principles that we form that guide us during our day toward applications. And this is where we're going to get into an area of philosophy called ethics. And ethics deals with proper conduct, what is right and wrong, and proper conduct. And what we use mainly is reason. Now, philosophy is regarded as a science. It is not regarded as a spiritual or emotional type ridden system of things. It is trying to be objective and to understand what is which means what is what is real, what is true. So, anyone can look this up to see not only is philosophy a science, but many of the sciences have broken out of understanding of philosophy. And because the word means wisdom, philosophy can be broadly umbrella of many other sciences. Now, we used to have psychology was a large part of philosophy in the early days. It sort of branched off into its own, and even some of the other sciences. But because we're talking about application, and because we're talking about betterment, right and wrong, and improvement, I will be talking mainly about ethics. I am concerned with improvement, betterment, better well-being of the world, of the animals, of the people within, reside on the world, and a course of action that would be wise and guide us in our movement. In other words, it has to be so simple that we can fall back on what is right and wrong and be secure in our belief of what it, or secure in our depiction of what is right and wrong. Not 100%, but if you study something, you learn for something, you make mistakes from an experiment, this is what's going to be focused on, so that when something comes up, you'll be able to make a decision and you won't be hurt. You won't make mistakes. You won't have to do it again in order to do it right. Now, we talk about, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there because this is getting off on a tangent and I want to slow down a little bit. I think we'll review quickly and say we've touched base on what we're going to do in these talks. We're not going to rush. We're talking about truth. We're talking about some very, very important subjects: virtue, improvement, betterment. And we can't go by them fast. We have to question what everyone means. We have to know the language and what we are talking about. If there's 20 meanings for goodness or for good, we want to know which one we're talking about when we're in the conversation, when we're in a talk, when we're talking. If we don't, we're subject to a fallacy. We're subject to going in the wrong direction and making a mistake. Unfortunately, language can be easily manipulated, and through rhetoric and how we use the words. And in a sentence, how we use that word in a paragraph. In other words, it can be turned around and shifted to mean something completely different within one paragraph, one section of a conversation, if we're not careful. So once we get off the path, the correct path, we have to start over again. So we want to find truth, we want to find understanding, and that means we have to be slow, focused, and correct. You know, if you go into the woods for the first time, perhaps it's dusk, you're subject to get hurt if you get off the path. The same way here. It's so easy to get off the path of finding truth and proper principles to live by. There are so many charlatans and people who are just extremely artful in rhetoric, clumsy, smooth, incorrect rhetoric that will change things around and take us off the path. In these talks, we want to stay on the path of correctness. We need it because it's so important to do what is right. We don't want to get hurt. We want to do good to other people, improve the situation for the world, its animals, its people, its environment. We simply want to do what's best for the well-being of everybody and everything. Will we make mistakes? Yes. Will we get frustrated? Perhaps. Is the journey long? Yes. But when you look back after a while and you see the constant circle of mistakes, the cycling of mistakes that people continually make through bad habits and following not logic, not reason, but simple urges, then we will feel better about ourselves and what we're doing and realize that it's a slow process. That's why we don't want to make mistakes. So I think we've learned something today. I wish I could give you something to apply today that we've learned. And I think that may take 10 minutes longer. I'll give you this. We have to build up strong principles. In other words, codes to live by. Certain truths that we can accept. And this, once we have enough codes and principles to live by that we can fall back on, then life will be much easier to make choices with, have opinions of, because we can always fall back to our principles of what is right and what's wrong. Do we have some principles that were given to us? Sure. Parents, our church, our peers, our education, our community. But in philosophy, we are going, now that you're an adult, now that you can think for yourself, it's important for a wise person to go back and reevaluate those principles. Do they follow the test of what is right and wrong? Are they reasonable? Are they true? Do they keep us on the right path? Or is it wishful thinking? Is it something other than that? That we continually get hurt by it. So this first principle, I want to give this today. We don't have any right now. Every principle that we get, we should question. So one principle that we might accept to start with is do unto others as they would do unto you. Now that's the golden rule. That's the principle that almost all philosophies and all religions accept. Does it mean that we have to accept it? Well, we don't have to, but it seems to make more sense than other principles, easier to see, and makes more common sense to us than other principles. So I don't feel it works because it works. It is because it works. So we have to start somewhere. Let's start there. And this is not an easy place to start, but it's the best place to start for now. To have one principle to live by. Let's try that out in the next few days. Let's try that out. What does that mean, though? Do unto others as you would do them. And how can you apply it? Well, it's almost common sense to accept it, because if somebody throws stones at your house, then you'll want to throw stones at their house. It's just normal reaction. It makes sense. So I would ask to accept that principle that all these religions have accepted, all these philosophies, all these communities have for centuries and centuries. And it's a pretty good start. So much so that the world would be better off 90% if everybody followed that one principle that everybody seems to accept. But they don't apply it. There's a problem there. If they really believe it, if they really understand it, and if they really think it is a principle, and they actually follow it, then you can apply that tomorrow. You can apply that principle tomorrow. Do something. Let some person who has 2 items get before you when you're in the line at the grocery store. Do something that would be nice to another person that you would want them to do to you. That's in a time of need, in a time of emergency, in a time of chaos. One must hold their principles firm. One must be the rock that everyone admires. So it's not enough to understand and accept that principle, but one must apply it, whether it's in a small way or for a length of time. But one must apply it. And whether or not you'll get an immediate reward for it, I'm not sure, but you will get a reward for it. And if you understand that principle, do unto others as they would do unto you, you understand how that would make a better well-being for everyone involved. Because we know now, more than any other generation, any other time on earth, that we are connected. We have the resources to understand how we're connected with DNA and archaeology and all the science that it involves, how we are connected. And in a very short time, there's very few things that separate us all. We come from the same place. We've grown together throughout the world. We've come under fire now. And it's time to help one another. So the other person will help you. So we have been reinforced in that principle. So much so that we should adopt it wholeheartedly now more than ever. And in small increments, we apply it. Whether it's holding a door open for someone, whether saying I thank you, I appreciate your kindness. These things are like algae or like a virus. It's a positive virus. It will spread. It will attach to people's psyche and will produce a positive effect, not only in a small microcosm, but in the macro world as well. So this is something we can apply. This is what wisdom gives us. This is what philosophy, one understanding of philosophy, the root of meaning of philosophy. And everyone can become wiser. Everyone, until they are wise. There is no barrier. The father of philosophy was not an academic. He formed a system of inquiry that brought out truth. He did it in a scientific manner, a systematic manner. That's why he was given the title Father of Philosophy. But he was not an academic. He wasn't a professor. Matter of fact, he argued with the professors of the academics and the sophists. So, everyone, and he said, no life is worth living without it being examined. In other words, self-examination is the key to wisdom, happiness, understanding, and a betterment for your well-being. You'll feel better about being yourself and being with others. So it can spread by small acts, but positive spreading. And you know that how much, in a positive way, how something can bring about a fruitful experience. Because you understand what it happens if you don't. If you have something that's not fruitful, not better for betterment. You can see the result of that. You just have to take the other way. So I think that's the application we can all work on and follow up on. And I'm going to sign off and thank you for listening. Come back. I'm anxious to clarify and answer questions of some of the things we talked today. I'm not going to argue about every word. We will redefine the words and make them clearer, but we're not here to debate and fight. Let the academics do that. They're good at that. They spend 8 years doing that within the universities. That is not what we are doing. We're here to find truth, find its application, find a betterment, find better ways, improvement of our well-being. And we don't need any confusion. We don't need fast talkers. We don't need yellers and screamers. It's too serious. It's too important. And it's too beautiful not to take it seriously and be focused. Thank you.